Welcome to DrJLT Economics and Happy New Year. Today I want to discuss the Evergrande situation a bit further. If you have followed this podcast or perhaps read my blog post, you will know that a few months ago I have written a blog post expressing my views on how the Chinese government should optimally approach this situation. In the interim, a lot of things have taken place, and I'm confident that you are on top of the news. But one thing that has really occurred to me is that most, if not all the commentators, most of the commentators who discuss this issue have approached it purely from the perspective of financial speculation, not even from a long-term economic understanding, but purely from short-term financial speculation. That's the perspective of financial speculation. As a result, in my judgment, they fail to grasp the seriousness with which the Chinese government is approaching this issue. And they fail to understand the medium to long-term economic impact of this situation, of the bubble, housing bubble in China, will have in global economy. So I make today's podcast purely with a hope that I can clarify some of these issues. And I hope that by the end of it, you will have learned something, or perhaps you will have heard something more precisely, that will be valuable to you. I will divide today's podcast into 4 sections. So the first, in the beginning, first things first, I want to slap myself on the back to say that I'm really happy, my heart really warms, seeing that the Chinese government is somewhat following the path that I believed to be optimal for them in addressing this situation, which is to refuse a bailout. Obviously, from a financial speculative point of view, this is really enraging a lot of those speculators. And that is why you will see all the negative commentaries popping up on news sites, popping up on podcasts. But those people, they don't really care so much about the economy. They fail to grasp that the global economy is a single unit. There are a lot of people who are ultra-nationalist, and a lot of the times, in fact, I agree with many of them on a lot of the issues, except for this this nationalism thing. They need to understand that you cannot, you could try a la North Korea to have a completely insulated economy, but that's only mean that you will fall behind. An economy of today is integrated with the economy of the world. And in this context, a bailout of such a large scale, ultimately it will be like $1 trillion bailout in China in the housing sector, will create the level of moral hazard that is, in my judgment, greater than the moral hazard created by the Wall Street bailout by Barack Obama and the Democratic administration or regime, however you want to call it, a decade ago. That is going to do tremendous harm to the long-term viability of the global economy. Of course, it will be exceptionally bad for the Chinese economy at first. Now, obviously, I'm very happy that the Chinese are understanding at least this point. They're not creating that moral hazard. But of course, I'm not saying that I agree with all their approaches, such as their lack of respect for personal property. Right? They are forcing the founder, the owner of Evergrande, to sell their property, to his own personal assets, to fund the operations. That, of course, is not something that I'm in favor of. Having said that, what I'm more opposed to was really the condition in which this company was able to grow so big, that the bubble was able to grow so big that it became a systemic risk for the Chinese economy. And let me just say it very clearly and straightforwardly. A threat of this level, 30% of China's GDP, on a historic bubble, is a threat not just to the Chinese economy, but really to the viability of the Chinese government, of the party. And that is something that, as a result, the Chinese government, the Chinese leaders are taking exceptionally seriously. Now, I have to say again here that, well, they're not taking this seriously, but they should have done it a few years ago. They shouldn't have let things sink to this level. That's so in China there was this proverb, right? When you're sick and your sickness was just on the skin, it was easy to cure. But when the sickness grows inside, develops inside, it becomes more difficult to cure. And when the sickness deepens into the marrows, it becomes impossible to cure. And this is an example. Now, I'm still glad that they are treating this taking this very seriously. And I have good confidence, not 100% confidence, but I have good confidence that they will be able to address this. This leads me to the second issue, which is that why is it that it is such a serious issue? Not just a matter of economics. Well, that is because China is facing a geopolitical challenge, which is, of course, led particularly by the United States. And this is a process that really started around 2008 with the Barack Obama, or let's call it administration, right? The Obama administration, and their pivot to the Pacific. And I think the Chinese government didn't really understand this, what this meant. They thought that that as America focuses more on the Pacific, they will become better friends with America. And this, in my judgment, is a failure in the understanding of the American culture. The American culture, it has a lot of great values that it has been promoting around the world, and I think part of the reason that America has soft power is because a lot of aspects of its values are great, are attractive, but at the same time, some part of these American values is American exceptionalism, which is the idea that and this comes from I would say somewhat radical understanding of Christianity, which is that the United States is a land chosen by God to lead the humans, and a lot of nowadays people call them new conservatives or new liberals, which increasingly is the same thing. Most of these people, they have the same value system, and part of it is American exceptionalism, which is that, and they believe that God has chosen them and that they have the responsibility to impart upon the world a certain set of values. Among them, the good ones, which is liberty, liberty, human rights, freedom. Abraham Lincoln said it. I don't really remember all those values, but freedom is the most appealing one. So that's that is in their belief system, and the Chinese leaders failed to understand this. They thought that they were just going to be friends, that China will be able to use American technology to grow its economy, and when the Chinese economy grows big enough, it will overtake the United States. But of course, the Chinese leaders never wanted to really challenge the leadership of the American leadership. Part of this, I'm saying this because I also see that the Chinese education system. I'm absolutely certain that the Chinese leaders are wise people. They are not stupid people, and they understand that with the Chinese education system, it is impossible for the Chinese to be leaders for long periods of time in the economy by itself. And this, I'm saying this as a Chinese, because I understand that the Chinese education system heavily penalizes original thought, heavily penalizes creativity, and makes it impossible for the Chinese the newer generations to lead on the global stage in technological innovation. And without technological innovation, China cannot long lead on the global stage in economics. So my understanding was that the Chinese leaders wanted to have a peaceful coexistence with the Americans, but they failed to understand that such was not the intent of the Americans. So now they are facing with the situation that the Americans are openly challenging the Chinese. They have found a pain point, the pinch point, or flash point perhaps, which is the Taiwan Strait. This is a very hot button issue, right? And the intentions of the American elites, let's say, or neocons, more precisely, is very simply to sustain a crisis around the region, to isolate China, and perhaps to provoke conflict. The last point is only a possibility. It's not inevitable. It's not an inevitability. However, given this situation, the Chinese leaders understand, in my judgment, they understand. Of course, a lot of trolls on the internet will say that those people are stupid. I don't believe so. I think they are brilliant people. I think They are brilliant people. They're smarter than I am, and they are smarter than everyone who is commenting on those podcasts or on those stupid forums like Reddit, because people who are wise enough don't have the time and energy to waste on the social media, which is really fucking piece of shit. Fucking Reddit. Right. But anyway, and excuse my French. So they understand that with this possibility, they must prepare the country for it. Right? In China, there is another proverb, which is that however large or powerful a nation is, it cannot long sustain if it just loves war. If it always goes to war, it cannot long sustain. At the same time, however peaceful a country it is, it cannot long be in peace if it's not ready for war. And so the Chinese government needs to prepare itself for war. And the key point here is to prick the property bubble. I think this is the thing. There is no doubt, undoubtedly, China has the largest property bubble in the world. I think, in my humble opinion, even if this bubble deflates by 80%, the Chinese housing market is still somewhat overpriced. The housing price is still overpriced. If you look at from the view of the affordability index, right? And then, of course, you see that the Chinese have built during this boom, during this basically period during which they are they're spicing up the GDP numbers with these housing constructions. They build a lot of things which ultimately have no value. Ultimately, they need to be taken down, those buildings, because one, you have overbuilt, and two, they are of very low quality and cannot long stand. So ultimately, these GDP numbers that went up needs to come down. And there's going to be of course, they're going to cook the books, right? They're going to find ways to soften the blow to the economy, and they are going to try to find ways to control the contagion of the deflation in the housing sector, perhaps with particular care in maintaining some kind of growth in the manufacturing and the technology sectors. The former being the still, in my judgment, the most important aspect of the Chinese economy. Even though the largest sector is housing, I think the most important one, the one that imparts China with power, economic power, is its manufacturing capability. So this is something that is going to be protected, in my judgment. And then there is, of course, high-tech innovation, which is lagging behind. And they're going to try, I think they're going to spend a lot of money, and it's not going to be very successful because, in my judgment, the Chinese education system has done a gigantic disservice to the Chinese nation. Let's not talk about the government, right? Let's talk about the national interest, the civilization, what the current education system has done to China is a crime against the civilization. It is so inefficient. It is killing, it's penalizing creativity, and it's really thereby killing the long-term viability of the civilization. So this needs to be addressed. I'd like to see some things done to it, and I think the Chinese government is aiming for, in my judgment, around 5 years, to be ready for any consequence during its conflict with the United States, or more precisely the new Cold War. So here we reach the third point, which I was going to say, which is that here goes the point that why I think those speculators, those commentators who approach the Evergrande issue from a purely speculative point of view are wrong. They are looking at this purely from the understanding of investors, and then of course not real investors, right? They are speculators, because long-term investors, real investors, invest in income-generating assets. They don't invest in bubbles. So speculators, well, I personally do not really care so much about speculators. I think that the fact that since the Greenspan put, there's this degeneration of the investment community is a tragedy. That skills and insights about investment is lost, and crazy people, speculators, who like Cathy Woos and so on, have become so quote unquote thought leaders in the investment community is a crime. It's almost criminal. But anyway, that was a digression. I think they were wrong in saying that, okay, they were saying that the Chinese government is screwing things up really badly, that they're wrong, that there's going to be a recession, and that there could be a global contagion. I think I do believe that there's going to be a recession in China, that there is going to be a global contagion. But I think the Chinese government is doing things correctly. Because for the reason I just explained in the previous section. So this part, I guess I'm not going to spend too much time dwelling on this. So let's just jump to the last part, which are what are some of the questions that really this leaves us with, and what are some of the answers that I can guess. So first, the first question, I have three questions, right? Question number one, can the Chinese government successfully deflate the housing bubble and control the contagion? I've given this some thought, and I think I have some confidence that the Chinese government will be able to deflate the housing bubble with some success. But I think it is limited by the fact, and this is a sorry fact, I think they need not be in this situation, but they are, which is that even though Western commentators would regard the Chinese government as undemocratic, and I have to say that it certainly does not follow the traditional democratic processes, the Chinese government is nevertheless a populist government. It nevertheless is a reactive government. It reacts to popular opinions, and with very high property ownership. I don't think that the Chinese government will be able to deflate the housing bubble to the extent at which there is no more long-term risk to the Chinese economy. So in other words, I would say that they will be able to deflate the most dangerous aspects of the housing contagion, but they will not allow the housing bubble to fully deflate. And I don't think they will be able to set up mechanisms that govern against future crises such as what we have been observing. So in other words, I think that they will achieve some success, but they will not be able to present a long-term solution. The second question, and this is a question that I want to ask, is within this context, what will be the contagion in the Western economies, and especially in the EU? And I think, just trying to answer this question myself, I think that as I said, there's going to be a global recession, and we all know that the European Union is facing already one of the worst, highest levels of inflation in major economies. So my understanding, my view is that the European Union will not fare very well in the coming decades. It is run with a highly inefficient, highly reactive, and highly undemocratic. In this case, it's actually quite similar to the Chinese system manner. And as a result, I think even though they are not the primary origin of the issue, I think they will be part of the contagion where the effects of the recession will be felt on a longer term basis. On a longer term, I'm not optimistic about the ability of European officials to address this issue, particularly because they are also sandwiched between how to say a rising populist movement within the Union and an increasingly ideological United States. That's really it has too many crises on its doorsteps. Of course, there's also the Ukrainian issue. So all these things sum up, making it very really limiting the room for maneuvering. And so I don't think they will do very well, and they will be one of the last places to recover. And then another question is, what's going to be the changes in Latin America in this geopolitical situation with the impending recession? I think personally, I think perhaps the Latin Americans, even though in the last few months, or perhaps in the last 2 years, I would say, the Latin America is turning left. I think they are not left in the sense that they will be more pro-China. I think they will still pursue a somewhat independent path forward, the left-wing parties, with some of the major players going perhaps to partner up with the United States for mostly ideological reasons. And this I'm not going to delve too much deeper in today's podcast because that would be going too far away from the Evergrande issue. So these are the 4 points. To sum all up, in this podcast, basically what I'm saying is that the Evergrande situation and the way that the Chinese government is approaching it is a sign to me that are clear signs that the Chinese are finally taking their housing bubble seriously. They are going to address and try to attempt to deflate the housing bubble in preparation for an intensifying geopolitical conflict with the United States in the new Cold War. I think that they will be somewhat successful, but they will not be able to fully remove or to fully defuse the housing bubble, limited by the setup of the current system. In the long term, I think they will not be able also to, even if they are to succeed in the geopolitical conflict, in the new Cold War with the United States, they will not be able to. I don't think China, let's say, will be able to become the dominant power or hegemon. And I even don't think that the Chinese government or the Chinese leaders are seeking to be in that position. And this is limited by the education system that is in place within China. All right, so thank you very much for listening to this podcast. I wish you a great day.